My name is Mason Reynolds, and at 28, I never imagined I would own a mansion while my parents beg at my doorstep. The irony is almost poetic. They threw me out when I needed them most. Not knowing I carried billionaire Lawrence Bennett's bloodline. They called me a liar, delusional even. Now they want back in my life, but karma has a beautiful way of revealing truth. Before I get into this wild story, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and hit subscribe if you want more stories about karma coming full circle. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago shaped who I am today. My childhood home was modest but comfortable, with faded blue siding and a small yard where Dad taught me to throw a baseball. Frank and Diana Reynolds were hardworking people who instilled the value of education in me from day one. Dad worked as a manager at a local factory, while Mom taught third grade at the elementary school 3 blocks from our house. We weren't rich by any means, but my parents made sure I never felt like I was missing out on anything important. Our relationship was everything you would expect from a loving family. Sunday dinners were sacred in our household, with Mom making her famous pot roast while Dad and I discussed sports or my latest school achievements. They attended every academic ceremony, basketball game, and science fair. I still remember how Dad's eyes would light up when teachers praised my work, and how Mom would display every certificate and medal on our living room wall like precious artifacts. Despite our limited resources, I excelled academically. I spent weekends at the public library, devouring books on every subject I could find. By senior year, I had the highest GPA in my school's history and earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University. The day I received my acceptance letter, my parents threw a small party with our neighbors and relatives. Mom cried happy tears while Dad proudly told everyone I was the first in our family to attend such a prestigious university. College opened up a world of opportunities one never knew existed. I double majored in business and computer science, spending nights coding and days analyzing case studies. While other students partied, I maintained a perfect GPA and applied for every internship that aligned with my career goals. The turning point came during my junior year when I spotted a listing for an ultra-competitive scholarship program at Bennett Enterprises, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country. The selection process was brutal with 5 rounds of interviews, technical assessments, and case competitions. Out of over 3,000 applicants, only 5 were selected. I nearly collapsed when I received the email announcing I was one of them. My first day at Bennett Enterprises headquarters downtown was intimidating. The gleaming glass tower seemed to touch the clouds, and the lobby alone was bigger than my parents' entire house. I felt out of place in my budget suit among employees wearing designer clothes. But I was determined to prove I belong. "Reynolds, you're with me today," said Abigail Roberts, a sharply dressed woman in her 40s who introduced herself as the executive assistant to Lawrence Bennett himself. "Mr. Bennett specifically requested to meet the scholarship recipients." That statement raised eyebrows among the other interns. Lawrence Bennett was notoriously private, rarely appearing at company events, let alone meeting with interns. Why would a billionaire CEO who managed a global empire take time to meet college students? The answer came later that afternoon when I was ushered into his penthouse office. Lawrence Bennett wasn't what I expected. In his early 50s, he had salt and pepper hair, intelligent blue eyes that seemed oddly familiar, and a calm demeanor that contrasted with his reputation as a ruthless businessman. "Mason Reynolds," he said, looking up from my file. "Impressive academic record, perfect test scores, and exceptional recommendations. Tell me, what drives someone from your background to achieve at this level?" That question led to a 2-hour conversation about everything from technological innovation to social inequality. I forgot I was speaking to one of the richest men in America and shared my honest thoughts about wanting to create systems that gave others like me a chance to succeed. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said with a strange intensity in his eyes. "Hungry, determined, unafraid to challenge established thinking. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't a standard meet and greet. Lawrence Bennett was studying me, looking for something beyond my resume. He began inviting me to private strategy meetings, asking for my input on projects far above my pay grade, and mentoring me personally. Within weeks, I was moved to a special project team reporting directly to him. This unusual treatment didn't go unnoticed. Tyler, my roommate who had also interned at the company previously, began spreading rumors. "Nobody gets that kind of access without giving something in return," he said one night after I returned late from the office. "People are talking, Mason. They think you're Bennett's new boy toy or something." I laughed it off, but the whispers followed me through the halls. Even Abigail seemed puzzled by her boss's interest in me, though she became a valuable ally, showing me the unwritten rules of corporate politics. "He's never taken this much interest in anyone," she confided one evening as we worked late. 20 years I've worked for him, and I've never seen anything like it." When I called home to share my success, my parents' reactions began to shift subtly. At first, they were ecstatic about my achievements, but as my stories featured more interactions with Lawrence Bennett, I detected a note of suspicion in their voices. "It just seems strange, honey," Mom said during one call. "CEOs don't typically mentor interns. Are you sure there's nothing else going on? What exactly are you implying?" I asked, feeling the first sting of their doubt. "We're just concerned," Dad jumped in. "Success this fast usually comes with strings attached." I hung up feeling uneasy. The people who had always been my biggest supporters were now questioning my abilities, suggesting I couldn't earn success on my own merits. Little did I know this was just the beginning of their betrayal. The truth revealed itself on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. Lawrence had asked me to retrieve some documents from his private office while he attended a board meeting. As I searched through his immaculately organized filing cabinet, a folder labeled Personal caught my eye. I knew I shouldn't look, but something pulled me toward it. Inside was a stack of papers including a birth certificate with my name on it. Not my parents' names, but Lawrence Bennett listed as my biological father. My hands trembled as I flipped through more documents, medical records, school reports, photographs of me at various ages taken from a distance, and payments to a private investigator who had apparently been tracking my life for years. The room seemed to spin around me. Had I been living a lie my entire life? Was my entire identity built on a foundation of deception? I sat in Lawrence's chair, unable to move, the documents spread across his desk when the door opened. "I see you found it," Lawrence said quietly, closing the door behind him. His face showed neither anger nor surprise, only resignation. "I wanted to tell you myself when the time was right." "Tell me what exactly?" I demanded, my voice barely recognizable. "That my whole life is a lie? That you've been watching me like some kind of science experiment?" He sat down across from me, eyes fixed on mine. "Your mother, Caroline, and I had a relationship in college. When she told me she was pregnant, I was building what would become Bennett Enterprises. I wasn't ready for fatherhood. And she didn't want to be tied to someone consumed by ambition. She married Frank Reynolds, who agreed to raise you as his own. So my dad isn't my dad? And Mom just went along with this." My world was collapsing inward. "Diana isn't your biological mother either," Lawrence said softly. "Caroline died in a car accident when you were 2. Frank had already married Diana by then. And she adopted you legally. I stayed away because they provided the stable family life I couldn't. But I never stopped keeping tabs on you. And the internship? The mentorship? Was that all just your way of easing your conscience?" Lawrence shook his head. "I wanted to know you, Mason. When I saw your application, it felt like fate. I needed to see what kind of man you'd become before revealing everything." I stood up, gathering the documents. "I'm taking these. I need time to process all this." "Mason, wait," he called as I reached the door. "We need to keep this private for now. The company is in the middle of a delicate merger. If news breaks about my secret son, it could derail everything." Give me 3 months, then we can go public together. I barely heard him, my mind racing with the need to confront the people who had raised me. Despite Lawrence's warnings, I drove straight to my parents' house that night, the folder clutched in my passenger seat. The confrontation was worse than I could have imagined. I laid out the documents on their kitchen table. The same place where we'd shared thousands of family meals. Is this true? I asked, watching their faces carefully. Am I not your biological son? Mom turned pale while Dad's face flushed red. Instead of confession, denial poured from their lips. Where did you get this nonsense? Dad snatched up the birth certificate. This is obviously fake. What kind of game are you playing? Lawrence Bennett showed me everything. I insisted. He's my biological father. Caroline was my real mother. Mom looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. A mixture of fear and anger. Mason, do you hear yourself? A billionaire has convinced you he's your father? This is absurd. The documents are right there. Documents can be faked. Dad countered. This Bennett character has filled your head with delusions of grandeur. Why would you believe we've lied to you your entire life based on some papers he showed you? Their denial was absolute. Not only did they refuse to acknowledge the truth, but they began constructing an alternative narrative where I was being manipulated by Lawrence for some unknown purpose. The more I insisted on the truth, the more concerned they claimed to be about my mental state. Maybe the pressure at work is getting to you, Mom suggested, her voice honeyed with false concern. Perhaps you should see someone. Talk to a professional. I don't need a therapist. I need you to stop lying to me. I shouted, my frustration boiling over. That night ended with them confiscating the documents. For my own good, and calling my girlfriend Jessica to express concerns about my mental health. When she arrived, they painted a picture of me having some kind of breakdown, inventing wild stories about being the secret son of a billionaire. Jess, you know me, I pleaded when we were alone. I'm not making this up. She looked at me with pity in her eyes. Mason, your parents are worried sick. Maybe you should take some time off work. This internship seems to be causing you a lot of stress. The betrayal cut deep. The woman I loved was choosing to believe I was mentally unstable rather than considering I might be telling the truth. When I returned to my apartment, Tyler had already heard about my delusions from Jessica and greeted me with similar concern. The final blow came the next morning when I arrived at the office to find Lawrence in an emergency meeting with the board. Abigail pulled me aside, her face grave. Your parents called the company last night, she whispered. They said you're spreading rumors about being Lawrence's son. The board is concerned about potential scandal or even litigation. When Lawrence emerged from the boardroom, his expression was grim. I'm sorry, Mason. I have to publicly deny everything. The merger is too important. Thousands of jobs are at stake. By noon, a company-wide email clarified that recent rumors about Lawrence Bennett having a secret son were completely unfounded, and that appropriate actions would be taken against those spreading such misinformation. In 24 hours, I had lost everyone's trust. My biological father had denied me. My parents thought I was delusional, my girlfriend was reconsidering our relationship, and my workplace had branded me a liar. The following weeks brought a swift and brutal unraveling of my life. At work, I was removed from Lawrence's special projects team and reassigned to data entry. Colleagues who once sought my advice now avoided eye contact in the hallways. My direct supervisor called me in for a performance review, where he made it clear that I was on thin ice. We value loyalty and discretion at Bennett Enterprises, he said coldly. Not everyone gets second chances here. Lawrence maintained his distance publicly, though Abigail occasionally passed me notes with apologies and promises that things would be made right eventually. These small lifelines did little to offset the daily humiliation of being treated like a pariah. Home offered no refuge. Jessica officially ended our 2-year relationship with a text message that read simply, "I can't handle this. I need space. Please don't contact me." No discussion, no chance to explain my side. Just abandonment when I needed support most. My parents escalated their campaign to help me, which really meant controlling the narrative. They contacted extended family members, old friends from high school, even professors at Northwestern, expressing grave concerns about my mental health. They described paranoid delusions about being related to Lawrence Bennett and my unhealthy obsession with wealth and status. When I confronted them about undermining me, they claimed they were protecting me from myself. "We're telling people you're going through a difficult time so they'll understand when you say these things," Mom explained during one particularly tense phone call. "These things are the truth," I insisted. "Why can't you just be honest with me?" "Because there's nothing to be honest about," Dad shouted. "You're the one living in a fantasy world." The situation at my apartment deteriorated rapidly. Tyler, convinced by my parents that I was having some sort of breakdown, began monitoring my behavior and reporting back to them. I discovered this when I overheard him on the phone one evening. "Yeah, Mrs. Reynolds." He was up all night again looking at old photographs and taking notes. "I'm really worried about him." I confronted him immediately. "You're spying on me for my parents?" Tyler had the decency to look ashamed. "They're concerned about you, man. We all are. This obsession with Bennett isn't healthy. Get out of my room," I said quietly. "And stay out of my business." That night, I found evidence that someone had been through my personal belongings. My desk drawers were slightly ajar, papers rearranged, and my laptop had been moved. When I checked my browser history, I found searches I hadn't made for terms like grandiose delusions and adult-onset schizophrenia. The invasion of privacy was the last straw. I confronted my parents directly, driving to their house unannounced. The argument that followed was unlike anything we'd ever experienced as a family. "You asked Tyler to search my room?" I demanded as soon as they opened the door. "We're concerned about what you might do," Dad justified. "You're not thinking clearly. So you violate my privacy? Go through my things without permission?" Mom stepped forward, placing her hand on my arm. "Sweetheart, we're trying to understand what's happening to you. If there's something troubling you, something real that's making you create these fantasies." I jerked away from her touch. "They're not fantasies. Why is it so hard for you to admit you've been lying to me my entire life?" "Because we haven't," Dad roared, his patience snapping. "This Bennett character has brainwashed you. Why would you believe him over the people who raised you?" "Because he showed me proof. Documents you stole and probably destroyed." Dad stepped toward me, his face contorted with anger. "I've had enough of this nonsense. Either you drop this ridiculous story and get help or what?" I challenged, standing my ground. "Or you're no longer welcome in this house." Mom gasped. "Frank, please." "No, Diana. I'm done. I won't have him accusing us of lying. Of not being his real parents after everything we've done for him." He turned back to me, pointing toward the door. "Make your choice, Mason. The truth or your fantasy." I looked between them. These people who had raised me, who I'd loved my entire life. I can't deny what I know is true. "Then get out," Dad said, his voice deadly calm. "And don't come back until you're ready to apologize and get professional help." Mom was crying now. "Please, Mason, just say you were mistaken. We can work through this." I looked at her tear-stained face and almost wavered. But giving in would mean denying my own identity, accepting a lie to make them comfortable. "I can't do that," I said softly. "I'm sorry." What followed was a blur of pain and humiliation. Dad went upstairs and began throwing clothes into a suitcase while Mom alternated between pleading with me to recant and helping him pack my things. Neighbors peered through windows as my father literally threw my bags onto the front lawn. You're making a scene, I said, mortified as a small crowd gathered. You did this, he spat back. Not us. As I loaded my belongings into my car, Mom pressed a check into my hand. Just enough for a month's rent somewhere. Please get help, Mason. When you're ready to admit the truth, you can come home. I tore the check in half. Keep your money. I don't need it. That night I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot. Too ashamed to call friends who had likely already heard my parents' version of events. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had thrown me out like garbage for having the audacity to confront them with the truth. I was 28 years old, employed at a prestigious company, and homeless because I refused to live a lie. Finding housing while maintaining my job became my first priority. Most landlords wanted proof of income, references, and security deposits I couldn't immediately provide. Hotels were too expensive for long-term stays, and friends had become mysteriously unavailable after my parents' character assassination campaign. At work, the situation deteriorated further. Someone had started a rumor that I was mentally unstable, leading coworkers to treat me like I might snap at any moment. Projects I'd previously led were reassigned. In meetings, my contributions were ignored or dismissed. The stress began affecting my performance, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. My salvation came from an unexpected source. Abigail, Lawrence's assistant, approached me one evening as I was leaving the office. Get in my car, she said quietly. We need to talk somewhere private. She drove us to a small coffee shop several blocks away from the company headquarters. After ensuring no one from work was present, she slid a key and an address across the table. Lawrence owns this apartment building. There's a unit available on the 3rd floor. It's yours if you want it. I stared at the key. Why would he help me after denying me publicly? Abigail sighed. It's complicated, Mason. Lawrence is playing a long game here. Carlson Industries has been trying to take over Bennett Enterprises for years. They'd been looking for leverage against Lawrence, anything to force him to sell. A secret son appearing out of nowhere would be exactly the vulnerability they need. So unjust collateral damage in a corporate war? He's trying to protect both you and the company. If Carlson knew who you were, they'd use you against him, or worse. She pushed the key closer. Take the apartment. It's registered under my name, so no one will connect it to either of you. Lawrence is covering the rent until this blows over. Swallowing my pride, I accepted the key. The apartment was small but clean, furnished with basic necessities. For the first time in weeks, I slept in a real bed instead of my car. The next morning, I found an envelope with $5,000 cash and a note that simply read, I'm sorry. Soon. Lawrence maintained his public distance but established a secure email account where we could communicate privately. He explained the delicate corporate situation in detail, promising that once the merger was complete, he would publicly acknowledge me as his son. 3 more weeks, he wrote. Then we can set things right. I've asked Abigail to keep an eye on you. Trust her completely. While the apartment solved my housing crisis, my social isolation deepened. My parents had been thorough in their character assassination. Old friends from high school sent concerned messages asking if I was getting the help I needed. Extended family members called with awkward interventions. Even professors who had once written glowing recommendations reached out to express their concern about my mental state. The most painful discovery came when I used my emergency key to retrieve more clothes from my old apartment, while Tyler was at work. In his room, I found a folder containing printed copies of emails between my parents and various people from my life. They had systematically contacted everyone who mattered to me, painting a picture of mental instability and paranoid delusions. Worse, they included fabricated stories about troubling behavior they claimed to have witnessed, me talking to myself, experiencing mood swings, becoming obsessed with wealth and status. They described a person I didn't recognize, manufacturing symptoms and incidents that had never occurred. As I read through their campaign of lies, a sickening realization formed. They weren't just denying the truth about my parentage. They were actively working to discredit me before I could expose them. This wasn't the behavior of people who genuinely believed I was mentally ill. This was the calculated response of people desperate to protect a secret. I was contemplating quitting my job and starting fresh somewhere else when I made the discovery that changed everything. While clearing out my childhood bedroom closet during another covert visit to my parents' house, I found a hidden compartment in my old desk, something I'd forgotten about since high school. Inside was a small metal box where I'd kept treasured items as a teenager. Among baseball cards and concert tickets was an envelope I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter dated 26 years earlier, addressed to my father from my biological mother, Caroline. "Frank, I know this isn't what we planned. But Lawrence has a right to know about his son. The money he's providing is for Mason's future, not to buy your silence forever. One day, Mason will have questions about his real father. And I want to be able to tell him the truth." The letter confirmed everything. They had known all along. The people who raised me, who claimed to love me unconditionally, had been paid to keep me away from my biological father. They weren't protecting me from delusions. They were protecting themselves from exposure. I photographed the letter with shaking hands before returning everything exactly as I'd found it. As I drove back to my apartment, the full weight of their betrayal crushed me. They had known the truth for nearly 3 decades and chose to label me mentally unstable rather than admit it. That night I hit rock bottom. Sitting alone in my borrowed apartment, I seriously considered walking away from everything: the job, the truth about my parentage, the people who had betrayed me. Maybe starting over somewhere new, with a different identity, was the only way forward. I drafted a resignation letter to Bennett Enterprises and began researching cities far from Chicago. Seattle, perhaps, or Austin. Somewhere I could reinvent myself without the shadow of this mess following me. Just as I was about to send the email, a news alert flashed across my phone. Bennett Enterprises successfully completes merger, stock soars. The corporate drama that had forced Lawrence to deny me was finally reaching its conclusion. Maybe, just maybe, the truth could now come to light. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when I arrived at work to find unusual activity in the office. Security guards I didn't recognize stood at strategic points throughout the building, and employees huddled in small groups, whispering excitedly. "Conference room, 10 minutes. My supervisor barked as he passed my desk. "All staff. Mandatory attendance." The company's largest conference room was packed to capacity when Lawrence Bennett walked in, flanked by the board of directors and a team of lawyers. He looked different somehow, standing taller, the weight of secrecy finally lifting from his shoulders. "Good morning," he began, his confident voice silencing the murmurs. "Today marks a new chapter for Bennett Enterprises. With the merger successfully completed, we're now the largest technology conglomerate in North America." Polite applause followed, but I could sense something bigger coming. Lawrence's eyes briefly found mine across the crowded room before he continued. "This is also a day of personal significance. For years, I've kept an aspect of my life private for business reasons that no longer apply. Today, I want to introduce someone special." He gestured toward me. "Mason Reynolds. Would you please join me at the front?" Whispers erupted as I made my way forward on legs that felt like jelly. Lawrence placed his hand on my shoulder, a gesture both protective and proud. "Mason is my biological son," he announced to the stunned audience. "DNA testing has confirmed what I've known for some time. Due to the sensitive nature of our merger negotiations, we kept this private until now. Moving forward, Mason will be taking on the role of Vice President of Innovation, working directly with me as we develop the next generation of Bennett technologies." The room exploded with gasps and frantic whispers. My former supervisor's jaw literally dropped. Colleagues who had been avoiding me for weeks suddenly looked at me with new interest, reassessing my value in the corporate hierarchy. Lawrence continued, outlining the company's future direction while I stood beside him, still processing what had just happened. After the announcement, we retreated to his private office where a team of PR specialists waited to discuss the public rollout of our relationship. "I'm sorry it took so long," Lawrence said once we were alone. "The timing had to be perfect to protect both you and the company." "Better late than never," I replied, still dazed by the morning's events. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. A press release announced my position and relationship to Lawrence, complete with DNA evidence confirming our biological connection. Financial publications ran feature stories about the secret Bennett heir, who had worked his way up from an internship. Television shows requested interviews, which Lawrence's PR team carefully managed. My new office on the executive floor offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. Abigail helped me navigate my suddenly elevated status, providing guidance on everything from appropriate attire to handling the sycophants who now appeared at every turn. "Amazing how quickly people forget they were calling you delusional just weeks ago," she observed dryly as she brought in yet another stack of congratulatory cards from colleagues who had previously shunned me. With my first executive paycheck and a generous, backdated inheritance from Lawrence, I purchased a mansion in Lake Forest, one of Chicago's most exclusive suburbs. By coincidence or design, it was only 3 blocks from my parents' middle-class home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Through mutual connections, I learned that my parents' financial situation had deteriorated significantly. Dad's factory was facing layoffs, and the private school where Mom taught had reduced her hours due to budget cuts. They were behind on their mortgage and considering selling their house, the same one they had thrown me out of just months earlier. I considered reaching out, offering help despite everything they'd done. Then I remembered the letter. Their deliberate campaign to discredit me, the nights spent sleeping in my car while they told everyone I was mentally unstable. Some betrayals cut too deep for immediate forgiveness. Instead, I focused on building my new life. I hired a team to furnish my mansion, bought a wardrobe befitting my position, and threw myself into learning the intricacies of the business Lawrence had built. He proved to be an excellent mentor, patient with my questions and generous with his knowledge. During this period, I met Sophia Chen, a brilliant software engineer who had recently joined our R&D department. Unlike others who approached me because of my newfound status, Sophia challenged my ideas and treated me like a normal person. Our first date turned into a heated debate about artificial intelligence ethics, and I found myself captivated by her intelligence and authenticity. "I liked you better before all this, you know," she confessed one evening as we walked along the lakeshore. "When you were just the quiet, intense guy from product development who always had the smartest solutions." "You knew me before?" I asked, surprised. "We worked on the Henderson project together last year. You probably don't remember me. I was just one of the coders. But I did remember her." She had suggested an elegant solution to a database problem that had impressed me, though we'd never spoken directly. The fact that she had noticed me before my connection to Lawrence became public made our relationship feel genuine in a world suddenly filled with opportunists. As months passed, I grew into my role at Bennett Enterprises, earning respect through my work rather than just my bloodline. Lawrence's health began to show signs of decline, making our time together more precious. We spent weekends at his lake house, making up for lost years as he shared stories about his life and my biological mother. "Caroline would be proud of the man you've become," he said one evening as we watched the sunset. "She was the most principled person I ever knew. That's where you get your stubborn integrity." "I wish I could have known her," I said, feeling the loss of a mother I couldn't remember. "In many ways, you're just like her," Lawrence smiled sadly. "She would have moved heaven and earth to protect you." "That's why she made the arrangement with Frank and Diana. She thought she was securing your future." The mention of my adoptive parents still brought a pang of hurt. Despite everything, I couldn't help wondering how they were coping with the public revelation that their decades-long secret had finally come to light. The inevitable confrontation occurred sooner than I expected. 3 months after Lawrence's public announcement, I arrived at my office to find my parents waiting in the reception area, looking simultaneously out of place and entitled. "Your assistant wouldn't let us in without an appointment," Dad complained, rising from his seat. He had lost weight, and new lines creased his face. Mom stood beside him, clutching her purse nervously, her hair showing more gray than I remembered. "I'm in meetings all day," I said coolly, not inviting them into my office. "You should have called first." "Called?" Mom's voice trembled. "You changed your number. We've been trying to reach you for weeks." This was technically true. I had changed all my contact information after their betrayal. "What do you want?" They exchanged glances. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Dad asked, eyeing the receptionist who was pretending not to eavesdrop. Against my better judgment, I led them into a small conference room and closed the door. "You have 5 minutes. I have a board meeting at 9. They sat across from me, their demeanor jarringly different from the last time we'd spoken. Gone was the righteous indignation, replaced by a transparent attempt at reconciliation. "You look well, Mason," Mom began, her smile strained. "The new position must be exciting." "Cut to the chase," I replied. "You didn't come here for small talk." Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to congratulate you, son. The news about Lawrence Bennett being your father, your new position, it's all wonderful. The audacity nearly took my breath away." "Congratulate me?" "The last time we spoke, you threw me out of your house and told everyone I was mentally ill for claiming exactly what turned out to be true." "We made a mistake," Mom said quickly. We were confused, scared. "Scared of what? The truth coming out? That you've been lying to me my entire life?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the photograph of Caroline's letter. "I found this in my old desk." "You knew everything, from the beginning." The color drained from their faces. Dad started to speak, then stopped, looking like a man whose rehearsed script had suddenly been rendered useless. "We were going to tell you when you were older," Mom finally said. "But the right time never seemed to come. The right time was when I showed you the documents Lawrence gave me. Instead, you gaslighted me, made me question my own sanity, and convinced everyone I knew that I was delusional." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We panicked. We were afraid of losing you to him. So you decided to destroy my reputation instead? Do you have any idea what you put me through? I slept in my car for weeks. I nearly lost my job. Friends I'd had for years wouldn't even speak to me because of the lies you spread. My words hung in the air between us. For the first time, I saw genuine shame in their expressions." "The business is failing," Dad admitted after a long silence. "The factory's closing next month. We have to sell the house." And there it was, the real reason for their sudden desire to reconcile. Not love, not remorse, but financial desperation. "So you thought you'd reconnect with your suddenly wealthy son? Perfect timing." "It's not like that," Mom protested weakly. "Isn't it? You had no interest in apologizing until my net worth was published in Chicago Business Monthly. The conversation deteriorated from there. What began as their attempted reconciliation devolved into increasingly desperate pleas for financial assistance. They had second mortgaged their house to keep Dad's business afloat. Maxed out credit cards, even borrowed from their retirement accounts. Now, with bankruptcy looming, they had turned to the son they had disowned. "We're not asking for much," Dad said, his earlier contrition giving way to entitlement. "Just enough to keep the house and pay off the worst debts. After everything we did for you, raising you as our own. After everything you did to me," I corrected. "Lying about my identity, taking Lawrence's money to keep me from him, destroying my reputation when the truth emerged. That's your legacy as parents. We gave you a good life. Dad's voice rose. We sacrificed for you. And then threw me away when I became inconvenient. You made your choice, Dad. Now you get to live with it. I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. Mom began to cry, genuine tears that would have moved me months earlier but now felt manipulative. Please, Mason, she sobbed. We'll lose everything. I already lost everything, I replied. My home, my reputation, my sense of identity. Where was your concern then? I escorted them out, maintaining a professional demeanor despite the scene they were creating. As the elevator doors closed on their stunned faces, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sorrow. These people had raised me, tucked me in at night, celebrated my achievements. Now they were strangers united only by decades of lies. The final confrontation came 2 weeks later when I arrived home to find them waiting outside my gate in the rain. Their car, an aging sedan I remembered from high school, was parked haphazardly along the curb. They looked bedraggled and desperate, a far cry from the confident parents who had once dictated my reality. You can't just ignore us, Dad shouted as I pulled into my driveway. We're still your parents. I could have called security, had them removed from my property. Instead, I invited them inside, if only to avoid creating a spectacle for my neighbors. The contrast between their shabby appearance and my home's opulence wasn't lost on any of us. Mom gazed around at the marble foyer, the crystal chandelier, the original artwork on the walls. This is where you live now? She asked softly. This is where I live, I confirmed, leading them to my study. What do you want? Our last conversation seemed pretty conclusive. They had received a final foreclosure notice. The bank was taking their house in 30 days. Dad's business had filed for bankruptcy, and Mom's school hadn't renewed her contract. They were, in essence, about to become homeless. We have nowhere else to turn, Dad admitted, his pride finally broken. No one will hire me at my age. Our credit is destroyed. So after everything, you come to me for a bailout. Not to make amends, not to truly acknowledge what you did, but for money. We're sorry, Mom whispered. We were wrong. About everything. For the first time, their apology seemed genuine, born not just from financial desperation but from truly facing the magnitude of their betrayal. Dad, the man who had never apologized for anything in his life, had tears in his eyes. I was jealous, he confessed. Afraid that if you knew Lawrence was your real father, we'd lose you. That all those years wouldn't matter once you had a billionaire's attention. Then when you found out, it seemed like my worst fear was coming true. So you tried to convince me I was crazy? Turned everyone against me? That was your solution. We panicked, Mom said. By the time we realized how wrong we were, it was too late. You were gone, and the truth was everywhere. They continued talking, laying bare the decades of deception, the fear and insecurity that had driven them to such extremes. As I listened, I felt the anger that had sustained me beginning to transform into something more complex. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps understanding. I need you to leave now, I said when they had finished. I have a lot to think about. Please, Mason. Dad actually fell to his knees, a proud man completely broken. We have nowhere to go. Mom joined him, both of them literally begging on the imported rug of my study. We're sorry. We'll do anything to make it right. I called security to escort them out, not roughly but firmly. As they were led down my driveway, the neighbors I'd yet to properly meet watched from their windows and gardens. The symmetry wasn't lost on me months ago. I had been the one humiliated on a front lawn, packing my life into a car while neighbors stared. Karma had indeed come full circle. 1 year passed, bringing changes I could never have imagined. Lawrence and I established a real father-son relationship, making up for lost time with weekly dinners and weekend fishing trips. He taught me the nuances of running a global corporation, and I helped modernize aspects of the business that had grown outdated. My relationship with Sophia deepened into something meaningful and real. She moved into my Lake Forest mansion, bringing warmth and laughter to rooms that had felt too large and empty. Her straightforward nature and emotional intelligence helped me navigate the complexities of my new life. "You're still processing trauma," she observed one evening as we discussed my parents. "Forgiveness isn't an obligation, it's a choice. And it doesn't mean letting toxic people back into your life." Under her influence, I began therapy, working through the layers of betrayal and identity confusion. My therapist helped me separate the good memories of my childhood from the devastating betrayal that followed, allowing me to honor the positive aspects of my upbringing without excusing my parents' actions. Lawrence's health declined more rapidly than expected. A heart condition that had been manageable suddenly worsened, forcing him to reduce his role in the company. Our time together took on greater urgency as we both realized it might be limited. "I have regrets," he admitted during a quiet moment at his lake house. "I should have been part of your life from the beginning. Caroline wanted me to be, you know." In her letter, the one she wrote before the accident, she asked me to step up, to be your father in more than just biology. "Why didn't you?" I asked, the question I'd held back for so long. "Fear. Selfishness. I told myself you were better off with a normal family than with a workaholic billionaire who didn't know the first thing about raising a child." He looked out at the water. "I was wrong. I miss so much. We're making up for it now," I assured him, realizing I meant it. As for my parents, I kept tabs on them through mutual connections. They had indeed lost their house and moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Dad found work as a night security guard, while Mom stocked shelves at a grocery store. A humbling fall for two people who had once defined themselves by their middle-class respectability. I struggled with whether to help them. Part of me wanted to maintain the distance, to let them experience the consequences of their actions. Another part remembered the good years, the sacrifices they had made, however imperfect their motivations. The decision was made for me when I encountered Mom at a grocery store 6 months after our last confrontation. I almost didn't recognize her, stooped over a display she was arranging. Her hair completely gray now, uniform too large for her diminished frame. She saw me before I could retreat, her eyes widening with a mixture of shame and hope. "Mason?" "Hello, Mom," I said, the word feeling strange on my tongue after so long. We stood awkwardly in the cereal aisle, other shoppers moving around us. She looked down at her name tag, then back at me. "This isn't how I pictured seeing you again. How are you?" I asked, genuinely wanting to know. "We're surviving." Her voice held no self-pity, only tired acceptance. "Your father's health isn't good. The night shifts are hard on him." I nodded, unsure what to say next. She saved me the trouble. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mason. What we did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that not a day goes by that I don't regret it. The lies, the way we handled everything when you found out." She blinked back tears. "You deserve better parents than we turned out to be." Her sincerity caught me off guard. This wasn't the manipulative apology from my mansion foyer. This was raw remorse from someone who had lost everything and accepted responsibility. "I have to get back to work," she said, glancing at her supervisor. "But it was good to see you. You look well." As she turned to leave, I found myself saying, "Would you and Dad be willing to meet? To talk properly?" The meeting happened at a neutral location, a private room in a downtown restaurant. Dad looked older than his 60 years, the security job clearly taking a toll on his health. They listened more than they spoke, really heard me as I explained how their betrayal had affected me. "We have no excuse," Dad said when I finished. "Only an explanation, which isn't the same thing. We made catastrophic mistakes out of fear and pride. It wasn't an instant reconciliation. There were too many broken pieces for that. But it was a beginning, a foundation on which something new might eventually be built." I offered them a modest business opportunity. managing a small property Lawrence had gifted me that I had no time to oversee. It provided enough income for a comfortable apartment and basic needs without being a blank check. More importantly, it allowed them to maintain their dignity while beginning to rebuild their lives. The relationship we're developing now is nothing like before. There are boundaries, conditions, and a tentativeness on all sides. Trust rebuilds slowly, if at all. But there's also a new honesty between us that never existed during my childhood. Lawrence made me promise not to let bitterness define my future. Caroline wouldn't want that for you, he said during one of our last conversations before his health deteriorated further. She believed in forgiveness, not as an erasure of wrongs, but as a release from their power over you. With Sophia's love and support, I'm working toward that goal. We're engaged now, planning a small wedding at Lawrence's lake house while his health still permits him to attend. My biological father will walk alongside me, and my adoptive parents will be present, though in a different capacity than they once expected. The family I'm creating now is built on honesty, not convenience or obligation. Sophia and I talk openly about having children someday, and I've already decided that any child of mine will know their full history from the beginning. The cycle of secrets and lies ends with me. Looking back at the tumultuous journey from that night sleeping in my car to now, I've learned that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's defined by who stands with you when the truth is inconvenient, who loves you when there's nothing to gain. The most valuable inheritance Lawrence gave me wasn't his wealth or name, but the courage to live authentically. The most important lesson my adoptive parents taught me wasn't in their words but in the consequences of their choices, that secrets eventually surface, and the damage they cause far exceeds the discomfort of truth. What about you? Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you saw yourself or your loved ones? How did you handle that revelation? Drop your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about family, identity, and finding your own path through life's complexities. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the truth may hurt, but lies destroy. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.